Welcome to Fresh Off the Boat, Ed Brand's podcast with students who've succeeded not just in their high school years to get into fine universities, but also make it over the years and be not just prove being college ready as a sort of path for success, but also proving their mettle while they were there and beyond. So I'm so delighted to be with you, Ramya. Ramya is a friend of a student I know, and she's been in touch since the time she graduated from Columbia. So Ramya, why don't you introduce yourself and we can take it from there.
Yes, of course. Yeah, hi Arjun and everyone tuning in. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to share whatever I can that'll help the next set of folks considering careers and research in science, engineering, and related disciplines. I am a material scientist. It's pretty much part of my identity. So if I introduce myself and I that's probably the first thing I say. And I've taken on that identity fully through my firm, which is also called Ramya Materials. So there's no confusion there. And I can start with little background also. My interest in the sciences started quite young. I was maybe 10 or 11 years old and wanted to be a doctor, and then realized that I could add more value by creating the solutions. Cures to diseases is what I had hoped. And then working on other areas of societal importance, and including climate change. So that's my motivation. I studied material science at Columbia University from 2012 to 2016. Came back to India after that and have been in Delhi ever since. I was working on a project at IIT Delhi in collaboration with AIMS Delhi on cardiovascular stents, focusing on the materials and manufacturing part. That led to a PhD in mechanical engineering as well. And in the last 3 years, I started off as a freelancer and then set up my consulting firm, which works on R&D consulting projects, either on materials or IP heavy innovation for startups and MSMEs. So quite a mouthful, but that's everything about me.
I think that's kind of succinctly summarized because I know there's a lot in between too. What path did you see back then? Like, okay, I'm going to go for a STEM degree. Material sciences was perhaps slightly far away in the radar, but what steps did you take to sort of be a student who could demonstrate that they are intellectually sort of eligible to apply to finest universities like Columbia?
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks for asking. I would actually, maybe I can break it up a bit, like my high school journey specifically. By the time I started high school, I was, again, reasonably clear I wanted to be in the sciences. The area that I wanted to work on was climate change. I had seen Al Gore's documentary, and I resonated with me. So from the ninth grade, I took every opportunity I had in the summers to start like putting these questions and causes to action. In the ninth grade, I did a project on prions, which are like a fourth class of microbes that cause mad cow disease. It's called bovine spongiform encephalopathy. So I'd connected with a university in Canada, one of the few that was working on it, and spent some time in the summer doing this for my own interests. I don't even remember why I was doing this. And then the following summer, I was interested in wastewater from RO systems. So I, was messing around with different solutions on that with a couple of friends. Ended up on a really simple product innovation that used the wastewater for like domestic cleaning purposes. And then I won an award for that from President Abdul Kalam at that time. So, I mean, in the 11th grade internship, I worked at USC. We at school, we were encouraged to do it. We had to do an internship. So I chose to do it at a research lab. And then that was on semiconductor quantum dots, because I really wanted to focus on physics and sustainable development. Somewhere in this whole bit, I found out about the Earth Institute. And at that time, we had the Millennium Development Goals and not the SDGs. So, Earth Institute really spoke to my desire to work on these larger causes, but work on the aspects that you can. So, scientist collaborates with a policymaker and collaborates with an economist. And so, that's how Columbia became my dream school. And ultimately, I applied early decision and got in, luckily. I was also a John Jay Scholar at Columbia, which meant I had access to different mentorship grants every summer, which I got maybe like $25,000 of funding over my 4 years to pursue research all over the place. And all of that was super helpful. So I hope that answers a bit
Yeah,
more.
fantastic. I think a very inspiring and very focused journey, just demonstrating your interest in so many ways through projects, and such diverse range of projects, from studying prions to wastewater treatment to semiconductors and quantum dots. So it's and then also winning an award for the social impact work in STEM that you did. So it's a rare honor to receive something from a country's highest sort of office. So congratulations on that. How did you tie all this in your application? Maybe you had the right, I mean, of course you had the right names, but and some of these special achievements stood out, but how did you tie in your story, like who you are as a person, in your college application? I know it was back way back then, but whatever you remember, we can dig out.
Um, Yeah, one more fun thing before I forget. So the fourth summer, the project I was doing was on cheeses because I really like cheese, and I wanted an excuse to eat more cheese. So I decided to check which one had the most calcium content and set up a series of experiments to do that. So to answer your question on the breadth of work, that was the breadth of work. And also links to Common App and the other things in college. I think if it anything you do stems from an interest, like a question you have or a cause you care about, and it could be anything. It doesn't even have to be in the sciences. Um, of course, that helps. When you're applying, when you're deciding how to pursue your career, what will it look like? Working backwards from an interest and a passion does help. If there's any inkling of that in school, even if you don't end up doing it. So for me, in my Common App essay, I think the story was pretty clear for me. I wanted to work on climate change. I wanted to work on impact like poverty alleviation, access to clean energy, clean water. And the way I wanted to do it was through physics and the sciences. And that was kind of the story uh, that I had. The only thing, at least at our time, there were a lot of different parts to the Common App as well as the schools you were applying to. So everything I had done till then, the important message was making sure it got conveyed in something or the other. So I wasn't necessary. This 1 minute, 2 minute spiel I just gave wasn't my essay, but could have been. But like every aspect of what somebody's done, anything, it could be anything, even like with an NGO or just a school assignment, that speaks to your interest and passion, uh, should get covered in the application. That was really the only bit of advice, and it helped because the Columbia app also had like 6 7 questions that went from like what books did you like to like why Columbia, obviously. But each of those can address and speak to work that you've done, because at 18 you already have some body of work, even if it's classes that you've taken, internships, projects.
So
Yeah.
definitely, there's a lot of passion coming through in different activities, achievements, and in your essay ideas. What about the human side? Like, did you really force yourself to think about, how I need to write instead of what I need to write is pretty clear, but did you even like start tweaking on the creative writing, narrative style
Yeah.
writing, personal interest sort of representation? How did
Mm.
you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I really liked writing actually from a young age, and I was at a school, fortunately, where they pushed us to pursue that at Vasanvali. So we had a lot of creative writing work, and I was editor of the science magazine. So I was also familiar with the idea of writing, but like with some kind of technical, aspect to it. I mean, the way I wrote, in fact, my Common App essay, it sounds really cheesy, but I was like at a traffic light and I saw a kid, and it still pains me a lot, as someone who's older and still not enough agency to do something about it. But that was my story, and I connected that to like why Colombia and why do I want to be in the sciences, because that's my tool, like that's the tool that I want to use to affect some change. So I shut myself in a room one day when I felt like I was inspired, and like dumped everything on a piece of paper, and that's how I wrote my questions for the Columbia app as well. I probably did a better job at that because I was really excited about it. So I the only other suggestion was that for yeah, in fact, for the college specific applications, I still do this. Initially, I wrote like bullet points. So I wrote like 3 4 bullet points of what came to me at that moment. Some of those bullet points were full sentences, but that helped me build the narrative, because obviously nobody writes their essays and application the night before. Like we spend months. Sometimes we have support of great people and folks at Edbrand, for example. So you have enough time, you have enough eyes, but the initial thoughts kind of need to come from you in whatever format. And that's a skill that honestly helps me even now write research papers and project proposals. So I would definitely work on that as a student today if I could, because it pays off. It's not like an annoying thing that you do for applications. It really helps.
Okay, so let's move forward in terms of understanding your journey in university. You mentioned a few things and how you use resources and you were given like grants to do research. That's all excellent. But how did you sort of start seeing the connections between the resources, the people, the ideas, and especially in the field of clean everything, clean tech, clean energy, clean
Yeah.
cities? So how did you start sort of getting closer to what you do today?
Yeah. Uh, So for me, once I reached Colombia, it was my dream came true. I decided that of course, first year I took classes. I mean, there wasn't much else. You get some flexibility to choose. Colombia has a core curriculum which is pretty rigid, which is what I wanted. And So two things happened. Funnily enough, I was super excited about the core, but my first set of classes was it's called literature humanities. You study these texts from ancient Greek literature to today, like up to Virginia Woolf. So that was horrible for me. I loved the class, but I realized that I was spending so much time reading and studying these things. Also, it ruined books and reading for me, because you had to like read a 500-page book in a week. And so if you didn't, they would ruin the ending in the class. So I was really sad about that, and eventually decided that college, like life is too short, college is too short. I don't want to spend so much time on, let's say, philosophy and literature, which are things I felt I could pick up later in life, because I wanted to do things. Like I was very action oriented. So I ended up. So that was one thing. The second thing was I was wanting to double major in physics and sustainable development. So within SUSTEP, there are a bunch of areas, like you said, clean energy, clean water, blah blah blah. So I started working on projects and looking at internships for each of these. And not all at the same time, but like I was working on a project on waste management in schools in India remotely with a bunch of people. I spent my first summer with an organization called Seva Bank in Gujarat, where they were financing clean energy products. So these two things happened, and as a result of that, I realized that I wanted to work on what is now called circularity and the circular economy a lot more. Uh, partly because I like the chemistry aspect more than physics. So that's why. I mean, I realized that later, but I decided to study material science because it was a cross-cutting discipline that allowed me to work on all these things, and start working on like waste and alternatives to plastic. So I switched programs. I actually switched to the engineering school at Columbia because I wanted to. Material science and engineering was an engineering discipline, and in my second year it was wild because I had to catch up on a bunch of requirements. I didn't want to do the 3+2 program, which is also an option at Columbia, because I didn't want to complete the physics and SUSTEP degree. So I had to switch, and I still finished in 4 years. But that second year was rough. And I was also then working in a lab by then. So basically, doing things helps define your interest, and whether you apply to grants or do internships or become like a president of a club or whatever, you got to test it out, right? And that's what college helps you do. And there's enough opportunity to wiggle and change what you do. I even considered economics for a minute back there and decided I liked science still. So yeah, and then I didn't do the philosophy classes, which I'm now regretting. But yeah.
So just looking through your resume with things that you did at Columbia, it seems like maybe 3 or 4 lifetimes could be filled in. So
Yeah.
you were a very busy student, from being an intern or even a research assistant, a teaching assistant,
Yeah.
summer research work. There's no time really. So
No,
what drove you to do so much while you were there?
you mean drove me to madness?
Possible.
I mean I burnt out at 21 for sure because I had been doing things since I was like 13, right? So yeah, so that is a word of caution. Like definitely measure it, because like there are skills that you learn from juggling things and exploring your interests, but it's also important to learn skills of self-care and like managing time for your own health and all of that. So I put those off, and it wasn't always the best.
In Columbia, which is obviously a school which attracts very committed, motivated students, it could be a high pressure at times with its breadth of requirements and a student like you trying to do so much. So, what do you think was like a pivotal moment in your where you hit rock bottom, or a kind of a peak, or in terms of getting a kick out of the work that you were doing? Anyone, like either the rock bottom or the peak, you could kind of elaborate more upon.
um there were so many peaks, I think, like so many like highs and happy moments. I think for me, I was happiest and most excited when like I had been visualizing something or working towards it, and I found a way to make it happen, right? So it like, and these are small wins. So like I'd come across this bioplastic called PHA, polyhydroxyalkanoate, because it can be made from waste carbon, so it's a truly circular product. And it became like kind of my purpose. I was like, oh, I really want to work on this. That's why I decided to study materials. And then I found ways to get into a lab that was working on related work. There was Professor Karthik Chandra, and then he mentioned a lab in Netherlands that was like really, had set the foundation for this work. We reached out to them with his support. I applied for a grant, spent a summer in Netherlands. So like it's a small win. It's not like I did some like groundbreaking innovation, but for me, reaching that endpoint was super satisfying. I reached rock. I mean, after the end of my sophomore year, that was like pretty rough because I had taken on a lot and I was trying to answer all the questions in my life, probably like every single thing. And after that, like when I turned 20, I would say like it was good because I figured I can only do one or two extra things and do them well. I had started managing my time better, taking on less. I was studying material science. So I think the rock bottom led to some happy things. But yeah, I would say there has to be some pace. It's a marathon. That's what I learned at IIT when I was trying to do the
Yeah,
PhD
so
also.
that actually brings me to the next part of your journey. like choosing to do mechanical engineering or doctoral studies, and which ended up in a PhD, and you did it in 3 years, so it is congratulations, fantastic. And how did like that transition happen from materials sciences, and of course had engineering in it too, but was that very clear, or it was something that evolved with time?
That was super accidental. I did not want to do a PhD at all. I was super impatient, as you can tell. I wanted to work on products. I'd already spent 3 4 years working in labs and all these projects after Columbia. So I was looking at fellowship opportunities, and I wanted to spend maybe a year applying those technologies to what we call translational research, where you're trying to take it from lab to pilot to market. So I looked for those options, couldn't find a clear answer. Spent a couple of months at Columbia itself with the same faculty, Professor Chandran. He was also working on a PhD project, and we were exploring like an India-US thing, maybe. Somewhere in the middle of that, I came back to India. I still had my OPT, but I decided that I wanted to see what was happening here. And then I came across a faculty here at IIT who was exploring the same materials, but for high value applications, which is medical devices. And they had already written a grant with AIMS, and that project had got sanctioned. So he offered a research assistant position to me. And I decided to do that over, let's say, applying to a master's or picking up another job. And yeah, one thing led to another. So yeah, it was not in like Mechie was not intentional. Ultimately, when you do research, though, it's so interdisciplinary. Like I was working on the materials, I was working on the translation of the research. So there was a lot of manufacturing and testing involved. The reason I stuck it out is too, it's pretty simple. Like I knew that med tech, medical devices are the hardest in terms of the journey of a product. It's medical and defense, right? The human research innovation is always driven by this protection of life. So if I could stick it out through that product dev journey, then I could probably work on anything. So it was a shift away from, let's say, climate, but the materials were the same. And also, my 10-year-old me was like, oh, yeah, you're like working on curing these diseases now. Good for you. So I stuck it out, and yeah.
Very often students think of studying abroad and then settling pretty much wherever they're studying. Many of our students go to the US and they sort of work on that dream. A few do find opportunities in other countries and maybe do a master's or an MBA or a PhD program and settle in some other countries. Very few find options in India or would want to be in India. So this is a very important part of our discussion because I don't meet students like you often for this podcast. What was going on in your mind when it comes to leaving just what the work would involve at IIT, but what was going on in your mind as to how you'd wish to contribute to things back home, or did you see knowledge creation as just a global need and it didn't matter to you where it was?
Yeah.
So of course, academically, in terms of your future career, and socially, some of these decisions that you took, what was playing in your mind, and what advice would you give students who are also interested to be very open-minded and look at opportunities anywhere?
Yeah, lots of points there. The last thing, the second last thing you said about research being a global phenomena and need, for me, partly naivety, partly an accident. Like I figured that the same research is happening all over the world. I can do it from India. It was, the whole in India for the world kind of thought process. And impact was a part of it. Plus, I did feel that if I could hack it, I could probably do more in India. And I maybe that's a longer separate conversation, may not be relevant here, but that is why I wanted to explore being here. I Yeah, I mean, I sort of I think like if you're working backwards from an interest, like see, if your goal is to migrate, I can be candid. then you'll look at it like that's your goal, like you're working backwards from it, right? So if your goal is some to pursue a certain interest or to pursue a career, let's say you want to do iBanking or I want to do XYZ, I'll work backwards from that and I'll go to where the opportunities are. So if you want to be in finance, or there are a lot of people who go to Hong Kong, because there's like, you're still in Asia, there's a lot of opportunities. It's there, these are growing economies, so very different set of challenges. You want to work in development, you're not necessarily going to be in the US, right? Because that's not where the opportunities are. So I would say working backwards from whatever your goal is, and like no judge, obviously there should be no judgment there, whatever that is, really helps you be open minded, because then like there isn't an obvious answer, especially when you're 21, 22. There's no right answer anyway.
So, there's this whole buzz around deep tech, deep technologies, and there could be a plethora of sort of applications of these technologies. India is supposed to be a laggard in certain areas, maybe drug discovery or something else, really innovative products. But you've been here now long enough to work in this field. So, what does Ramya Material as an organization do, and how would you explain deep tech in a broad sense first, and then what are your like key motivators? Which kind of products innovations would you think excite you most?
Hmm. Um, oh, also on the earlier point, it really helped me to have peers who were already had made that transition back to India out of choice. One of them is somebody the person who introduced me to you, right, Gautam, and he was already in India. I had a bunch of my classmates and friends from Colombia. All of us decided like we wanted to be in India because one of them was working in public health, the other wanted to work on like a tech for diabetes product. India is a much better market to do all this, honestly. So yeah, coming back to deep tech, deep science, um, I would say because I've been here now for 7, 8 years, and I went through my 20s in India, I have like networks and an understanding of how things happen here, and that has been helpful to set up this whole journey in deep tech. Within deep tech, I would pick out like there's three general areas the way I see it, and it's an evolving definition. But there's the whole AI piece that everyone sees and knows. I can't comment on that because I don't know that. So that's one, and all its ancillaries. Then the second is deep science. So when in deep science which is also called translation, something I referred to earlier in the conversation. The idea is like you're taking tech from lab to market. It's pretty simple, and that's what our firm tries to support people with, because there's so many steps in that journey, many of which I've gone through as a student or as a researcher myself, and others I'm experiencing now with my team. But that journey from idea to market is where um actually is that's where India gets left behind sometimes, because there isn't enough support on that journey, and that could be funding. I see founders struggling to raise funding from investors because investors don't understand that tech. That's something we're trying to help people with now on both sides, investor and founder side. I It could be lack of access to labs, because India hasn't doesn't have 150-year head start for various reasons. To have that infrastructure ready to go. There is public funding for research. There's a lot of government grants that have already gone in. There is some industry funding. So the reason that, like you said, deep tech, deep science, all of this is getting left behind or has been, is because of this unstructured system. So that's why being an ecosystem player, like an ESO also we call ourselves, is what we felt is the best way. Because if you're attached to one idea and one product, there's only so much you can do. It's like you have X impact. But now that I've talked about my whole journey, it's pretty clear that you want to do like everything, right? So if you can not work on one product, but like 1,000 products, and amplify, accelerate, enable, that'll hopefully push the needle a little bit. And for deep science and manufacturing, which is the other part of what we do, and deep tech, there's so much to be done, because any product you want to make, nobody else is doing it. And it's like a 1 billion plus set of users. So it's like it's a free for all. Like there's no reason that we can't make geography specific solutions and products that will do well. So it's a, I mean, and this decade is also great. Like it's a sunrise, biotech, climate tech, these are sunrise sectors. COVID is was such a difficult time, but it really pushed science and, like you said, drug delivery, drug discovery, vaccine research to the fore, which India is part of. It's very much part of, and it'll have to be, because a solution for even Egypt, or Canada is not going to work in India as is. So we will have to do that. So the question is just, is it going to be an international company that sets up an India arm, or is somebody from here going to solve that problem? So little tangential
Yeah,
related to what you asked. Yeah.
oh, perfect. The last question I have for you is, being an entrepreneur, running your own consulting, but also figuring out interesting deep tech projects, products to launch. What are some of the exciting projects that you are working on or have worked on with clients, or for your own sort of company's product sort of playbook? So yeah, it'll be fun to hear that and then sign out.
There's so many. I mean, we're always so excited about every project. We've probably worked with 15 different companies now in the last few years, and so many more that speak to us. Like, I always feel so lucky when somebody reaches out with their idea, because it's like the biggest gift, right? They're like, oh yeah, we want to do this, like super, and I cannot disclose any of that. But um so a couple of like super interesting ones. One was a platform tech for drug not drug discovery, sorry, disease detection and drug delivery. And that same technology has uses for OLEDs and carbon capture. So this is as interdisciplinary as it gets. And we set up research with two labs at IIT Delhi to do this innovation. And it's a long journey for a biotech startup. It's like 7 years, but that's something we're still associated with and we're excited about. Another one was an active packaging product, which is, I mean, they're just now like coming out of stealth. They're just launching, so I can speak about it. We were associated with them really early on. They were exploring. So active packaging basically can detect when the fruit or vegetable is spoiling, which is really like the next frontier in both food waste prevention as well as, of course, packaging itself. And when you're starting from scratch, you can also address the problem of alternatives to fossil based traditional plastics. So they're working on biopolymers, also working on active packaging. So, yeah, I mean, many, many more. These are two that I've picked. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ramya. It's been so delightful to catch up and learn about so many new things from you. All our students who are listening, watching, it'll be good to leave comments, and you can always reach out to me, and I can sort of stay in touch with you, and perhaps we can do a panel discussion with some of our invitees in the future. So thanks again, Ramya, and look forward to staying in touch.
Thanks for having me, Arjun.